There are moments in life that arrive without warning. No drums, no signal, no preparation. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning that decides, without asking anyone's permission, to become the kind of day that rewrites everything. This is one of those days. It begins on the corner of Riverside and Fifth, in the middle of a city that never slows down long enough to notice the small things. Buses groan past, pigeons scatter, coffee cups get tossed into overflowing bins. People in pressed suits and people in worn sneakers all move in the same direction, forward, always forward, because that is what cities demand. Keep moving, don't stop. There is no time. But time, it turns out, had its own agenda that morning. A man in a charcoal overcoat moves quickly through the crowd. He is on his phone, head down, words clipped and impatient, the way that people who are always important always speak. He doesn't notice when something slides from his coat pocket. He doesn't hear the soft slap of leather against concrete. He's already half a block away by the time it lands. The wallet lies there on the sidewalk, fat, brown, slightly cracked at the corners, the way expensive leather gets when its owner has had it for years. Cards fan out slightly from the impact, and visible even from a distance is the unmistakable edge of folded $100 bills. A thick fold. The kind of fold that represents months of someone's life. People walk past it. A man in running shoes steps around it without breaking stride. A woman glances down, pauses for exactly half a second, then keeps walking. A teenager almost stops, looks left, looks right, then moves on. 3 minutes pass, then 4. The wallet just lies there on a busy city sidewalk, invisible in the way that only temptation can be invisible, noticed by everyone, touched by no one. And then come the small sneakers. Scuffed at the toe, pink laces, one tied tighter than the other. They stop, they turn. And a little girl, 8 years old, small for her age, with 2 braids and a backpack that is slightly too big for her frame, crouches down slowly and picks up the wallet with both hands. Her name is Maya, and what she does next is the reason this story exists. To understand Maya, you have to understand where Maya comes from. She lives 6 blocks from that corner, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator works maybe 3 days out of 7. The apartment is small. The walls are thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. The carpet in the hallway has needed replacing for 2 years, but inside their unit there are Maya's drawings taped everywhere, on the refrigerator, beside the window, above her bed, bright crayon suns and lopsided houses and figures holding hands. It is the kind of home that doesn't have much but feels like everything, because the woman who built it poured herself into every corner of it. That woman is Diane, 41 years old, a home health aide who works long hours for modest pay because she is exceptionally good at caring for people who cannot care for themselves. She is not a woman who complains. She is not a woman who asks for help easily. She keeps her chin level and her feelings private and her daughter close, and she has been doing all 3 of those things alone for 8 years. That Saturday morning, Diane had taken Maya with her to the farmer's market downtown because Maya had been asking to go for 2 weeks, and Diane, despite the tight grocery budget and the aching feet, had said yes. They'd walked the whole way. Diane had found a deal on sweet potatoes and a bunch of collard greens, and had counted out exact change at the register the way you do when every dollar has a job. On the walk back, they stopped near the park bench on Riverside so Diane could fix the lace on Maya's backpack that had come loose. It was right there, during that pause, that Maya spotted the wallet near the curb. She picked it up with both hands, the way you pick up something that might be fragile. She looked at it for a moment, then she opened it. Inside, several cards, a folded receipt, a small photograph, and cash. More cash than Maya had ever seen in one place. She didn't count it. She could see enough. She could feel the weight of it. She closed the wallet carefully, stood up, and turned to her mother. "Mama," she said, her voice quiet and certain in the way children are certain before the world teaches them to second-guess themselves. "Somebody lost this." Diane looked at the wallet, then at her daughter's face. She knew that face, that particular expression of calm resolve, like the decision had already been made before the question was even asked. "Yes, baby," Diane said, "they did." "We have to find them," Maya said, not as a question. Diane took the wallet gently, looked around, then spotted the community police post at the end of the block. She took Maya's hand and they walked toward it together. Maya's steps were unhurried, untroubled. She had done the math in her head, not the financial math, but the other kind, and the answer had come back clean. It wasn't theirs, someone was missing it, that was all. They handed the wallet to the officer on duty, left no contact information because Diane didn't think to, and walked home. Maya asked for a hot chocolate when they got back. Diane made it with the last of the cocoa powder and a little extra sugar. The morning, as far as Maya was concerned, was over. It was not over. Richard Caldwell had been sitting on a bench in Riverside Park when the wallet fell. He had seen it happen. He had watched the man in the charcoal coat rush past, seen the wallet slide free, watched it hit the ground. He had also seen, in the 30 seconds before he could decide what to do himself, that the man was already gone, swallowed by the crowd, phone still pressed to his ear, completely unaware. Richard was 42 years old. He was white, lean in the angular way of men who forget to eat during long work weeks, and he had the kind of face that had once been open and was now careful. He had built a logistics and supply chain company from a shared office space and a maxed-out credit card, and it had grown into something worth more money than he had ever imagined being responsible for. He employed over 4,000 people. He sat on the boards of 2 charitable foundations. He had been in Forbes 3 times and had hated all 3 articles because they always described him in ways that didn't feel entirely true. That morning he had told his driver not to come. He had walked to the park alone because he had not slept well and had not been sleeping well for months, and the doctor had told him that fresh air was not a cure but it was a start. So he sat on the bench with bad coffee from the corner deli and watched the city move and tried to remember the last time he had felt like a real person rather than a function. He watched the wallet lie there, he watched people pass it. He was about to stand up and retrieve it himself when the little girl appeared. He watched her pick it up, watched her open it and close it without removing a single thing, watched her turn to her mother with that quiet, decided expression. He did not move, he could not have explained why exactly. Something about the moment felt important in a way that required stillness. Like if he interrupted it, it would mean less. He watched the mother and daughter walk to the police post together. He watched the girl stand straight beside her mother at the counter, backpack slightly crooked, waiting patiently while the adults handled the adult part. He watched them hand the wallet over. Then he watched them walk away, east on Riverside, past the pharmacy, left on Clement and out of sight. He sat with what he had just seen for a long time. Then he stood up, left the rest of his bad coffee on the bench, and walked in the direction they had gone. He told himself he only wanted to thank them. He told himself he wasn't sure why it mattered so much. He told himself a lot of things on that walk. Not all of them were entirely honest. He turned onto Clement Street just in time to see them disappear into the building on the corner. 4th floor, he could tell from the window where a small light came on a few minutes later. He stood on the sidewalk below for a moment looking up. Then he walked back to the park, called his driver and went home. He did not forget the building, he did not forget the girl, and he did not, for reasons he couldn't fully articulate yet, forget the mother. 2 days passed. On the 3rd day, Richard Caldwell stood in front of the building on Clement Street with an envelope in his hand and a carefully rehearsed reason for being there. He had thought about this, had run through the conversation in his mind, what he would say, how he would explain himself, how he would make the offer without it feeling like charity, without it feeling like condescension. He rang the bell for Unit 4C. The intercom crackled, a woman's voice slightly wary, "Yes." "My name is Richard," he said. "I was at Riverside Park on Saturday. Your daughter found a wallet. I'd like to thank her if that's all right." A long pause, then the buzzer sounded. He took the stairs, 4th floor. The door at the end of the hall opened just as he reached it, and a woman stood in the frame in scrubs with her hair pulled back and her expression firmly neutral in the practiced way of someone who has learned not to show surprise until she knows what she's dealing with. He looked at her face, and the carefully rehearsed conversation he had prepared dissolved completely. He knew that face. He had known that face for 10 years, or rather, he had spent 10 years trying not to think about it, which is an entirely different thing. He knew the exact line of her jaw and the way her eyes went still and careful when she was deciding something, and the way she held herself like someone who had stopped waiting for anyone to help carry the weight. The color did not drain from his face. Something worse happened. Something flooded back in, warm and terrible and completely inconvenient, and he stood in the hallway of a 4th-floor walk-up on Clement Street and felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, entirely undone. "Diane," he said. It came out like something that had been held underwater and finally let go. She looked at him, her hand was still on the door. Her face gave nothing away, but something moved behind her eyes quickly, like a fish beneath still water. "Richard," she said. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere behind Diane in the apartment, a small voice called out, "Mama, who is it?" And then Maya appeared at her mother's side, looking up at the tall man in the doorway with the frank, assessing curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to hide her scrutiny. Richard looked down at the little girl, 8 years old, small for her age, two braids and a backpack she had abandoned near the door. She looked at him with her head tilted slightly to one side and her expression open and patient. He felt something shift in his chest that he did not yet have words for. "Are you the one who found the wallet?" he asked her. Maya nodded once. "I came to say thank you," he said, properly. Maya considered this. "You don't have to," she said. "It wasn't mine, I just gave it back." "I know," he said. "I still wanted to say it." Diane had not moved. Richard looked back up at her. Her face was still carefully still, the stillness of a woman who has had a lot of practice with difficult moments and has learned to let the moment finish before she responds to it. "Come in," she said, and it wasn't warm, but it was a door opening and he walked through it. The kitchen table was small. 4 chairs, one of which was stacked with Maya's school books. Richard sat across from Diane while Maya climbed into the chair beside her mother and picked up an apple from the bowl in the center of the table and began eating it with the complete ease of a child who sees no reason the presence of a stranger should interfere with a snack. Richard placed the envelope on the table. He explained it, the education fund, fully set up and funded, no conditions, no strings, no publicity required. He explained his foundation. He explained that the wallet had belonged to a colleague, that inside it had been not only the cash but a flash drive containing data worth considerably more, and that Maya's decision to hand it in had prevented what would have been a genuinely serious situation. Diane listened without expression. When he finished, she looked at the envelope for a moment, then looked at him. "How did you find us?" she asked. "I followed you," he said. "From the park. I know how that sounds. I want to be honest about it." He paused. "I watched your daughter find that wallet and I watched her hand it in and I needed to find her. I'm sorry if coming here crossed a line." Diane looked at him for a long time, then she said quietly, "Why are you really here, Richard?" The question sat between them. Maya ate her apple and looked back and forth between the two adults with the attentive calm of a child who can feel the weight in a room even when she doesn't understand the shape of it. Richard looked at Diane, he looked at Maya. He looked at his hands on the table. "Maya," Diane said, "can you go finish your drawing in your room for a bit?" Maya looked at her mother, looked at Richard, looked at the apple in her hand. "Can I bring this?" "Oh yes, baby." She slid off the chair, tucked the apple under her arm, picked up a crayon from the windowsill as she passed it, and disappeared down the short hallway. A door closed softly. The kitchen was very quiet. "She's 8, Richard said. He said it the way a man says something he has been doing arithmetic around without wanting to name the answer. "Yes," Diane said. He looked at her, Diane's. "Don't," she said, not unkindly, just precisely. "I'm not trying to," he stopped, started again. "She looks like you, but there's something." "Richard," her voice was level, "what are you asking me?" He held her gaze. "Is she mine?" The kitchen stayed quiet. Outside, a bus groaned past on the street below. Somewhere in the apartment, faint and soft, the sound of a crayon on paper. Diane looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked back at him, and when she did, her eyes were steady and clear and told him everything before she said a single word. "Oh yes," she said. One word, quiet as a door closing, heavy as everything. Richard sat very still. A man can prepare for many things. He had prepared in the back of his mind for the possibility when he saw Maya's face in the doorway. But preparation and arrival are entirely different countries, and he had just arrived and the ground was entirely new under him. "You never told me," he said. His voice was different now, stripped of the careful professional register. It sounded like a younger man's voice. "No," Diane said. "Why?" She looked at him with an expression that was not unkind but was not gentle either. It was honest. "Because you had already made your choice, Richard, and I wasn't going to spend my life asking you to make it again." She folded her hands on the table. "I wasn't going to raise my daughter on maybe." The word landed the way it was meant to. He felt it. He thought about the letter he had sent her 20 years ago. Formal, 3 paragraphs. The kind of letter that said everything and nothing at the same time, that dressed cowardice in complete sentences and expected to be forgiven for the grammar. He had written it at his desk at 3 in the morning and sent it before he could change his mind, because he knew that if he saw her face he wouldn't be able to do it. He had been right about that. Seeing her face, even now, even 20 years later in a small kitchen with a tablecloth and a bowl of apples between them, he could feel exactly why he had been unable to do it in person. Because the person he was when he was with Diane was the person he actually was. And he had not been ready to let that person be seen by the world he was trying to build himself into. "I was a coward," he said. "Yes," she said simply without cruelty, "you were. I don't have an excuse." "No, you don't." He nodded slowly. "I've thought about it," he said, "more than I've told anyone, more than I've admitted. I told myself 100 different stories about why it was the right call. None of them held up." Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I stopped being angry a long time ago, Richard. I built a life. Maya is the best thing in it. I'm not sitting here carrying something for you." "I know," he said, "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" He looked at his hands, then back at her. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I followed a child home to say thank you. I didn't know she was going to be your child. I didn't know you were going to be standing in that door." He paused. "But I'm sitting here now and I'm looking at you and I'm trying to figure out how to be honest without asking for something I don't have the right to ask for." Diane looked at him for a long time. Then she stood up, moved to the counter and put the kettle on. Not because either of them necessarily wanted tea, but because some conversations need something to do with your hands. "She doesn't know," Diane said with her back to him, watching the kettle. "I've told her that her father wasn't around. I haven't said more than that." "How do I?" He stopped. "What do you want me to do, Diane? Tell me what you want and I'll do it." She turned around and looked at him with those steady eyes. "I don't know yet either," she said, "so we're both going to sit with that." He left an hour later. The envelope stayed on the table. Diane had not pushed it back, which he understood to mean she would think about it. At the door, Maya reappeared from the hallway with a drawing in her hand. She held it out to Richard without ceremony. It was a picture of a wallet, and a hand, and a small stick figure standing very straight. "That's me," Maya said, pointing at the figure, giving it back. He took the drawing with both hands and looked at it for a long moment. "Can I keep this?" he asked. Maya considered. "Yes," she said, "but take care of it." "I will," he said, and he meant it for more things than the drawing. What followed over the next several weeks was not a fairy tale. It did not move quickly or smoothly or with the confident momentum of a story that already knows its ending. It moved the way real things move, hesitantly, with reversals, with long silences and careful small steps and occasional moments of terrible vulnerability that neither of them had planned for. Richard did not disappear this time. He had done that once. He was not going to do it again. He began by doing the only thing that felt right without overstepping. He reached out through Diane, not around her. He sent one message: "Can I come back? No agenda, just to know her if you'll allow it. I'll go as slow as you need." He waited 4 days for a response. When it came, it was short: "Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, don't be late." He was there at 9:45 and sat in his car until 10 exactly. Diane opened the door. Maya was at the kitchen table with cereal and a book. She looked up at Richard when he came in, said hi, and went back to her book. It was the most uncomplicated greeting he had ever received, and it nearly broke him open. He sat at the kitchen table. Diane made coffee. Maya read. Nobody performed anything for anybody. It was just a Saturday morning in a small apartment, and it was, Richard thought, one of the best mornings of his adult life. They did not tell Maya yet. Diane was firm on this. The decision would be made carefully and with the advice of someone qualified to guide it, and it would be made when the time was right, not when it was convenient for Richard's feelings. He agreed without hesitation. He was not the one who had been here. He was not the one who had done the work. He did not get to set the pace. But he kept coming back, Saturdays mostly, sometimes just for an hour. He brought nothing except himself, no gifts, no envelopes, no money. Diane had made clear that what Maya needed was not his money. He understood. He sat at the table. He listened to Maya talk about her teacher and the project she was doing on birds and the fact that her best friend had a dog and she wanted a dog but their building didn't allow them. He answered her questions when she asked them, which she did with the direct and unembarrassed curiosity of a child who hasn't learned yet that some questions make adults uncomfortable. "What do you do?" she asked him one Saturday, not looking up from the drawing she was working on. "I run a company," he said. "What kind?" "We help move things from where they're made to where people need them." She thought about this. "Like trucks?" "Trucks, ships, planes, all of it." She nodded, satisfied. "That's important," she said. "My mom says everything you buy at the store had to travel to get there." Your mom's right, he said. She's usually right, Maya said, matter-of-fact, crayoning. Diane, standing at the counter, kept her back to them, but Richard saw her shoulders shift slightly. He didn't say anything. The world outside that small apartment did not stay quiet. Richard had never been a particularly public figure in his personal life, but he was recognizable enough that his repeated presence in a neighborhood like Clement Street did not go entirely unnoticed. A photograph appeared, blurry, clearly taken from a distance, Richard walking into the building with a coffee cup. A gossip column ran it with a question mark for a headline. His phone lit up accordingly. A board member called to ask if everything was all right. An old friend from his early investment days called to ask more or less the same question with more thinly veiled alarm. His mother, 71 and still formidable, called and asked him to come for dinner without stating why, which was her way of stating exactly why. He went to dinner. He sat at the long table in his mother's house where he had grown up, and he told her not everything but enough. He had reconnected with someone important to him. He wanted to be part of something that mattered. He was not asking for her approval. She looked at him across the table for a long time. She was not a woman who said things carelessly, and she did not say anything carelessly now. "Are you happy?" she asked. He thought about Saturday mornings at a small kitchen table. He thought about a child handing him a drawing with the instruction to take care of it. He thought about Diane's face across a table, guarded and honest and more real to him than almost anything else in his life had ever been. "I'm trying to be," he said. "For the first time in a long time, I'm actually trying." His mother picked up her fork. "Then don't stop," she said. She did not call again with concerns. Board members were a different conversation. Richard had never been a man who confused professional relationships with personal ones, and he had no intention of starting now. He made clear in the flat, even tone that had ended more than one negotiation over the years that his personal life was not a matter for the board and that he expected the matter to be treated accordingly. Nobody pushed back in ways that mattered. People who have built what Richard had built tend to find that others adjust. The gossip column published one more item, then moved on to something else. Cities are not short of stories. 6 weeks after that first Saturday morning, Diane sat on the edge of Maya's bed after lights out. In the dim quiet that is one of the only times children will say the things they've been carrying all day. Maya was staring at the ceiling. Then she said without preamble, "Is Richard going to keep coming?" Diane was quiet for a moment. "Would you like him to?" Maya thought about it with the seriousness she applied to most things. "Yes," she said. "He's quiet. I like people who are quiet." She paused. "He looks at you a lot." Diane felt something tighten gently in her chest. "Does he?" "Like he's checking you're still there," Maya said. Then she turned over and pulled the blanket up and closed her eyes, apparently having said what she needed to say. Diane sat in the dark for another few minutes after Maya's breathing deepened. She thought about the letter that had arrived 20 years ago. She had read it 3 times, folded it into quarters, put it in a book, and never opened the book again. She had not been devastated, or not only devastated. Mostly she had been unsurprised in the particular heartbroken way of people who hoped for one thing and quietly expected another. She had built her life. She had made it good. She had made it real. She had never looked for Richard and had never wanted to, because the wound had healed into scar tissue, and scar tissue is not soft but it is strong, and she had needed the strength more than she had needed the softness. And then her daughter had picked up a wallet on a sidewalk, and the universe had handed her back the one question she had stopped letting herself ask. She sat in the dark of her daughter's room for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and typed a message, "Next Saturday, stay for lunch." She sent it before she could think about it too carefully. The reply came in under 2 minutes, just "I'll be there." She put the phone down and went to the window and looked out at the city for a while and felt, underneath the caution and the history and the very reasonable self-protection, something old and inconvenient beginning to warm. The conversation they had eventually about Maya, the real one, the one that required the presence of a child psychologist, and 3 separate conversations between Richard and Diane before they agreed on how to approach it. That conversation happened on a Sunday morning about 2 months after the wallet. Maya sat at the kitchen table. She was not given a performance. She was not sat down with anxious faces and heavy silences. She was told quietly and honestly in language that didn't talk around her that Richard was her father, that he and her mother had known each other when they were younger, that things had been complicated, that he was here now and wanted to be part of her life if she would like that. Maya listened to all of it without interrupting. When Diane finished, Maya looked at Richard for a long moment. "Did you know," she asked him directly, "before?" "No," he said, "I didn't know until I came to say thank you." She absorbed this. "That's lucky," she said, "that I found the wallet." "Yes," he said, "it is." She looked at the table, then back at him. "Are you going to be around?" she asked, not accusatory, genuinely checking. "Yes," he said, "I'm going to be around." She nodded once, the same single nod she had given him when he asked if she was the one who found the wallet. Then she slid off her chair, went to the refrigerator, studied its contents for a moment, and turned around. "Can we have pancakes?" she asked Diane. And that was that. Not that it was simple. Children process things in layers, and Maya was no exception. There were questions over the following weeks that came at unexpected moments, while she was brushing her teeth, while she was in the back seat of a car, while she was in the middle of dinner. Richard answered every one of them with the same careful honesty and the same steady presence. He was learning in real time how to be a father. He was doing it slowly and imperfectly, and with the kind of humility that only comes from knowing you don't have the right to rush. As for Richard and Diane, that was slower still, and more complicated, because they were adults, and adults carry more and hold on longer and have more carefully constructed reasons for protecting themselves. There were evenings when Diane let him stay for dinner, and they talked at the table after Maya went to bed. About their lives, about the years in between, about the things they had built and the things they had lost and the things they were not sure about. There were also evenings when Diane was tired and needed the space that was hers, and said so plainly, and Richard left without making it complicated. He never pushed, he never assumed. He showed up when he was invited, and he respected the door when it was not open, and he waited in the way that a man waits when he understands that the waiting is not a punishment but a proof. One evening in late November, they were sitting at the kitchen table after Maya was asleep, and Diane was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I don't trust easily anymore." "I know," he said. "Not because of you, not only because of you," she looked at her hands. "I learned not to because I had to." "I know," he said again. "I'm not going to pretend that history isn't there," she said. "I wouldn't ask you to. And I'm not going to let you think that because you're here now everything before is erased. It isn't." "No," he said, "it isn't. I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to be worth the risk of what comes after it." She looked at him, he looked back. The kitchen was warm, the radiator clicked. Outside, the city made its ordinary sounds. "That's a better answer than I expected," she said. "I've had time to figure out what I want to say," he said. 20 years, give or take." She almost smiled. It was the most he had seen her face open in all the weeks he had been coming to this table, and he understood that it was not nothing. It was, in fact, something quite significant. "Ask me again in the spring," she said, "whether I trust you." "Okay," he said. "And don't take that as a promise," she said. "Take it as an honest answer." "It's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years," he said. "I'll take it." There is one more thing worth knowing. The original wallet, the one that started everything, belonged to Gerald Pratt, a business associate of Richard's. When Richard eventually told Gerald the full story of how the wallet had been recovered, Gerald was quiet for a moment and then asked if he could do something to express his own gratitude. Richard told him the matter had already been handled. Gerald insisted. After some negotiation, Richard allowed him to make a contribution to the local community center near Clement Street, the one Maya went to on Thursday afternoons for an art program. The art program got new supplies in December. New canvases, new brushes, good quality paint. Maya came home that Thursday with paint on her elbows and a look on her face of pure, uncomplicated happiness. She showed Diane the picture she had made: big, loose brushstrokes, bright colors, something that might have been a park or a street or simply a feeling given form. "What is it?" Diane asked. Maya looked at the painting for a moment. "It's the day I found the wallet," she said. She said it the way children say things that are simply true, without drama, without weight. It was a day. It was an ordinary day on an ordinary sidewalk with an ordinary choice, and she had made it without fuss and without expecting anything from it. She hadn't been trying to change anyone's life. She hadn't been trying to return a father to himself. She hadn't been trying to hand her mother back the chance at something she had stopped hoping for. She hadn't been trying to remind a billionaire that the whole architecture of his life had been missing something simple and human at its center. She had just found a wallet and given it back because it wasn't hers. And sometimes, not always, and not because the universe is tidy, and not because good behavior guarantees anything. Sometimes the smallest right thing cracks the right door open at the right moment, and through that door comes everything that was always supposed to be there, just waiting for someone honest enough to hold it open. Maya hung the painting on the wall above the kitchen table. It stayed there all winter. Richard noticed it the following Saturday and said nothing about it for a long time, just looked at it. Then he said, "That's a good painting." Maya, eating cereal, didn't look up. "I know," she said. And Diane, standing at the counter, allowed herself quietly, privately, without making anything of it, to smile.